Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have you and to have you participating in this exciting event. My name is Sean Schrader. I am a student at the University of South Florida, which is located in Tampa Bay, Florida, in the United States. And I'm very fortunate to be a Millennium Fellow and work with so many of you and work with such a great organization across the world. For those of you that have just joined us, if you could please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, the country where you are from, and the university which you attend. And we're really excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Rachel Sumekh. Rachel Sumekh is the founder and CEO of Swipe Out Hunger, the leading nonprofit in addressing hunger among college students. Her work was recognized by the Obama White House and landed her on the 2017 Forbes 30 Under 30 list of social entrepreneurs. Rachel began Swipe with a few friends as an undergraduate at UCLA in 2010. It has since grown onto over 120 universities, serving 2 million nourishing meals. Their innovative approach allows university students to donate unused funds from their meal plans to feed their peers. Rachel wrote the Hunger-Free Campus Bill, which passed in multiple states, sending $20 million to fight hunger. She received her BA from UCLA and credits her upbringing as the child of Iranian Jewish immigrants for her intersectional perspective. Thank you so much, Rachel, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sean. Hi, everyone. I wish in the chat you had also written what time zone you were in, so I would know how to properly address you. But good morning for those of you on the West Coast like I am. If we haven't had the pleasure of meeting before, my name is Rachel Sumekh, and I'm the founder and CEO of Swipe Out Hunger. And amazing. Thank you for the context there. I'm the founder and CEO of Swipe Out Hunger, which, as Sean mentioned, is committed to ensuring that all college students have the basic needs that they have met so that they can thrive and do well in school. So our work began back in 2010 when no one was really talking about college students going hungry. And we were able to grow from that point to now building a national movement that I'm excited to share with you all today. So let's dive in, because I know we have a lot to cover today. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, so sharing is paused. Can you guys see my slides? Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so I would love to show people where we started. So this is back in 2010 with me and my co-founder, Brian, in a basement at UCLA somewhere. And now we've grown from that one school to over 145 colleges across the United States and expanded to Canada finally. Our work is really grounded on this notion that if there are people that are hungry, one, and if there are people that have extra food, then there's a natural connection point here that one should not exist when the other is also around. So my friends and I convinced our university administration to let us donate the extra money that we had on our meal plans, which you had to buy in advance, to other friends that we had on campus who were hungry. Obviously, the school, for those of you who went to school and bought meal plans, know that the school did not want to give this money away. It was hundreds of millions of dollars that they expected to keep at the end of the year, that every year they've had there. And now here come this group of students who are saying, we want to control what happens with this money that we've already paid for, that our tuition dollars have paid for. Naturally, the school was very resistant. And being the rebel rousers that we were, we still went forward with the program. We went into our dining hall, started to buy to-go boxes of food, and then walked out onto the streets into our community and just handed out food to whoever needed it. Soon we asked other students to do the same thing, to go in the dining hall, get boxes of food, and bring it out to our table. One day we had collected nearly 300 boxes of food, and one of the dining hall managers came out, saw what we were doing, came over to our table and smashed one of the boxes of food and said, "This is not happening on my campus. Stop immediately." I, at this time, was about 19 years old. I was raised by amazing Middle Eastern parents where you are taught as a young woman to never offend anyone. Be kind, be understanding, respect authority. And this was the first moment that I said, maybe I'm not supposed to just listen. Maybe I'm not supposed to just follow the authority and trust the power structures that are, because here we're doing something good. Here we're saying we want to feed people. And yet this person who has this power is telling me to stop doing that. You know what? Let's stop with the slides for now. I'll just continue with the story until I figure this out. And welcome to everyone who's still coming into the room. What my friends and I decided to do in that moment when we had friends who were going hungry and our university administration was telling us to no longer run this program, we said, we've got to find a way to make this work. We've got to find some sort of partnership. So we went over to the university and we sat through months and months of meetings until we finally convinced the campus to allow us to donate the extra money from our meal plans onto the accounts of other students on campus who are hungry. This was able to now help 2.5 million meals be donated just through this sharing of meal swipes. This is me and my co-founder, Brian, and a map that kind of shows how we've gone from being on one campus in a basement somewhere to now 145 universities across the US that are in this strong movement. So why have we built Swipe Out Hunger? Why did we choose to build a movement to address college student hunger? Because in the United States, 1 in 3 college students are food insecure. They don't have regular access to enough food, which is shocking, right? I don't know how many of you on your campuses, I know there's a few folks on the call who are activists on their campus around this cause, so you're very familiar. But I love to ask people a fun trivia question of how many schools in the United States do they think have food pantries, a space where people can go and get food? You have to guess how many schools in the United States have a dedicated space to go and get food. How many schools would you say? It's about 800 colleges in the United States that have a dedicated space for students to go and get free food, which is crazy that there's 800 places that have a dedicated space for students that need help. And yet nationally, we don't talk about this. This is one of the biggest challenges that we face when it comes to addressing issues of poverty. We hide behind these issues and we act like they don't exist in our communities because we act like if we don't talk about it, somehow it'll go away. And I think everyone on this call knows that we have to talk about things in order to address them. So over the past 10 years, Swipe Out Hunger has grown onto 145 colleges, over 2 million meals, and we've passed over $70 million in legislation to make sure that students have access to food. Is there anyone on the call? Good question. There's about 4,000 colleges as a whole in the United States, so about 1 in 5 that have a pantry. Josephine, we would love to help you get one started. I'm curious to know if there's anyone on the call who's interested in policy work, who wants to go into government, wants to help write and change policy. I'll be spending a little bit of time today talking about what it means to work on legislation and take this work to a systems level as well. At Swipe Out Hunger, our work has 3 core pillars. The first is the work that we do on campus, making sure that food pantries that we just talked about are stocked with healthy food, making sure that students can go and access amazing food in community at their dining hall. So that's our campus solutions. We're introducing solutions to solve the problem right now. Secondly, we focus on student empowerment. All of our sites, all 145 of our sites, are run by college students who reached out to us and said, I want to get a program started on my campus. And then we talk about policy and advocacy, because we have to understand that, as we say in the hunger world, we don't just want to feed the people who are in line, we want to shorten the line. We want fewer and fewer people to end up in that line. And that's where policy and advocacy work comes into the picture. So now let's get into it. I'm going to make this a little bit more interactive. So I'm going to copy this as well. But will someone in the room read this quote for us? Just unmute and read what you've got here. And I might jump in as a warning, but please.
Okay. Can I read?
Please.
Okay. So
introduce yourself and where you live before you do.
So my name is Javed Nahian Ratul. I'm from Bangladesh. And I basically work in a project called Project Oporjita, which is basically based on gender equality. I mean, SDG Goal 5, basically. Okay, so now I'm trying to read. How do we recapture the power of public narrative and learn the art of leadership storytelling? Leadership story is first a story of self, a story of why I have been called. Some people say, I don't want to talk about myself, but if you don't interpret to others your calling and your reason for doing what you are doing, do you think it will just stay uninterrupted? No, other people will interrupt it for you. You don't have any choice if you want to be a leader. You have to claim authorship of your story and learn to tell it to others so they can understand the values that move you to act, because it might move them to act as well. Marshall Gans, thank you.
Thank you so much. And way to demonstrate leadership by jumping in. So has anyone ever asked themselves this question or said this to themselves? I don't want to talk about myself. And what we realize happens after when we choose to say that. When we choose to say, I don't need to tell someone my whole story. They can assume, or I'll let them assume. I know who I am. They don't need to know. But the thing that's really annoying about this is that they're going to make assumptions anyway. And so we have to choose to tell our stories. And it takes work to learn how to tell your story, to be able to tell people, hi, my name is Rachel Sumekh. I'm 29. I was raised speaking a different language than English, and I've been able to build a career as a female social entrepreneur. And I'm so proud of the movement that I built. And now I want you to join my movement, right? Being able to, within 10 seconds even, get some few key identity points across that help people know what grounds you. And then can someone else reread this last paragraph real quick?
Okay. Can I read the last paragraph?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. You have to claim authorship of your story and learn to tell it to others so they can understand the values that move you to act, because it might move them to act as well.
Can everyone take a moment and think about someone they know who has told a story before, and that story highlighted what their values were? I think a lot about the greatest storyteller ever, President Barack Obama, who, when he tells his story, you understand why this man wanted to run for president, right? I think about sometimes even my coworkers, I think about my parents, who are people, who's famous or not, you can throw them in the chat, that when they speak, you can tell what at least one of their values are, and what value is it. If anyone wants to unmute and share, that would be great.
Okay, can I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, Josephine.
Okay, my name is Josephine, from Nigeria. So I remember my secondary school principal, every time he says his stories or he tells us more about his background, one thing I capture from it is that discipline. He doesn't joke with discipline, and he tells us why that discipline really has a great impact on him and why he was trying to impact it on us too. So I always have that on my other hand all the time, that was like a story that has really gone a long way for me personally.
Beautiful. That's an exactly perfect example of someone who demonstrated why their value is important and said it to the right audience, right? It was important for him as a teacher to demonstrate to students why discipline is important, especially when you're younger. So someone jump in. Who's another person who, when they speak, you can tell what their values are, or one of the values that they have when they speak through. Some examples of values are: I value community. I value love. I value generosity. I value honesty. Go ahead, Aaron.
There is an African writer based from Nigeria. She's called Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. She writes about African literature, especially issues to do with politics. When she's writing and telling her stories, she brings out a good figure in which you can tell how we've transited back from the times, the colonial times, to now being established as our own societies, the challenges our own societies are facing in transiting power from one leader to another. So one aspect that I value most from her is the integrity to keep on to our values from the times we bring out ourselves independently. So that's what I like from her.
That is powerful. I mean, like, her language, the words that she has used have literally like fueled movements. I mean, like, Beyonce put her in her music. That's how powerful it is, right? And it just demonstrates that if we choose selectively what stories we tell when we have the microphone, we have the ability to really push forward a message. So I want everyone to take 1 minute and think about, when you speak, what is one value, just one, or if you have extra time, 3 values that you want the world to know about you. What do you stand for? Why do you do what you do? And what's a value that you want the world to know? And if you can, think about a story that demonstrates that value, whether it's a story of, I had a moment with this person and here's how I demonstrate that I care about that value, or your whole life can be a story. Use your whole narrative of who you are and why you are where you are today to tell that story. For example, when I say that I grew up in a home that relied on public assistance, and I saw how that support got my family to where we are today, and that's why I believe that everyone deserves the right to access free food, and my value is access, then it can take, your whole life can be served as a story. So I'll give everyone just 30 seconds, a minute to think about what's one value. And if you're ready to throw it in the chat, what's a value you want the world to know? And start to think about a story you can tell to demonstrate that value. Beautiful. I see more and more people jumping in. Please add your values here. And more importantly, start to think about what stories you want to tell when you meet people, what stories you want to tell when you're in presentations, that without even you trying, demonstrate to people who you are. And if you'll remember, the last part of that quote said, we tell stories that demonstrate our values because that might have the other person realize that they share that value. When I tell people about the love that drives my values and my intention, people will be touched and say, I also think that everyone should share their love, that everyone should be resilient, that everyone should have growth and selflessness and empathy and all these beautiful values you all have thrown in the chat. So think about what stories you want to tell. I'm going to go back to our slides real quick. We're going to open it up to Q&A in just a moment, but I want to share one more learning with you all from Marshall Gans, who is an amazing professor at the Harvard Kennedy School of Public Policy. In a lot of ways, he's the godfather of organizing, and I can share this full essay with you all, but who wants to jump in and read this first paragraph?
Hello. Okay, can I read the paragraph?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay. It says, communities get organized because there are people among them who are skilled organizers, who are skilled leaders.
Anyone here identify as an organizer or a leader? I would hope many of you. that this is who drives a community forward. We don't just do it by accident because we're all angry, right? They say a movement is the difference between a cult and a movement is a cult is people who all think the same thing and are moving in the same direction. A movement is people who think different things, but are moving in the same direction. So an organizer comes in and gets people who might think a little differently, but want to go to the same place, a world of justice and peace and equity, and moves them forward. Okay, someone read us this last paragraph.
Can I go?
Yes, please.
Okay. Leadership is about enabling others to achieve purpose in the face of uncertainty. When there's certainty, when you know what to do, you don't need leadership. If it's when you don't know what to do that the arts and creativity of leadership matters. It matters even more in enabling others to work together to achieve a common purpose in the face of uncertainty.
Does that resonate with anyone? This line specifically here, that leadership is about enabling others to achieve purpose in the face of uncertainty. When there's certainty, when you know what to do, you don't need leadership. Does that run counter to what you maybe thought about leadership? We'll have to open it up. I'll throw this in the chat so we have it, and I'll stop sharing my screen. So how does this quote make you feel? How does it redefine your understanding of leadership?
I just wanted to say that from reading that I now understand that it's a lot of work to be a leader because a lot of people depend on you. And for the success of the community, it's up to you. So you have to really to be a leader is a lot of work and it needs a lot of commitment.
And yet it can be something that's shared. I think sometimes we see a leader as a hierarchy where there's one person and then many people working underneath them that rely on this person to give them the answers. My favorite type of leadership is a snowflake. I don't know if anyone has been in real snow before, but the structure of a snowflake is many, many little parts that have kind of like spokes connected to them. So there's many points of leadership, and then they all work. Yeah, it's like a star, this connectivity that we have, kind of like how the universe works. There's all these galaxies. And the best types of leadership are the types where information kind of goes in a circle, where responsibility and leadership are shared. But it takes even more work because that way you all have to be talking to each other and all have to work through your challenges. So Phyllis, you're absolutely right that it is really hard. And the more people who are at the table, it's much better, but it gets even harder to keep up that clear communication. But that's the way that it stays sustainable. And leaders like you and me don't burn out because burnout is real. I wanted to lift up also here that it says in the quote, I put it in the chat, but it's when you don't know what to do that the art and creativity of leadership matters. I think all of us here maybe have a little creative bone in our body, have like enjoyed scribbling or doodling, or are actual artists who make beautiful art. Leadership is also an art. We have to remember that every leadership book you've read is just someone who decided to come up with some philosophy. But it really comes down to what is it that I'm trying to have exist in the world? And how do I get creative about making that happen, not doing it the same way? I want us to continue this conversation in the Q&A. So hold on to these definitions of leadership. We can come back to them. I want to hear your pushback also. Do you agree with this? Does it sound right? Does it work for your community? Let me jump back into just a bit more about our advocacy work real quick. So, okay. So going back to 2017, a few years ago, we were contacted by a state senator in California who said, I want you to write a bill that's going to end college student hunger. And I had never written legislation before. I was always a political nerd, like I loved it, but I didn't even know how to write a bill. I remember Googling, like, how does a bill become a law? And I think I read about it like 10 times and I still didn't understand, right? But what I had to do in this moment was say, even though this elected official, this legislator, came to us and said that she wanted a law, the rest of her partners in the state Senate didn't understand our issue. They were not quite there yet. So it was my job, when I was given 2 minutes to make my pitch at the state capitol, to come in and have them understand the story and the world that I live in. Because many people, especially those who are electeds and live far off on some mountain somewhere, don't know what's happening on the ground. They live in a reality that's different than mine. So when I was given this chance, I came in, as you can see here, I said, it's on everyone's mind. The public's will to act has never been so present. If you turn on Google alerts for the phrase hungry college students, you're going to get several articles a day, which is true. I didn't stand there and talk about the issue for 2 minutes, which I did for a little bit, but then really focused on how do I get this person to understand the importance in this moment? So policy work is so much about telling the right stories that move people forward. And who is better to do this than students, than all of you as young leaders, as Millennium Fellows? Truly, when a young person, you don't even need to be a student anymore. When a young person contacts, this is with a federal office. This is not, this is Senator Amy Klobuchar's office. Our students just reached out and said, we want a meeting. And they've now had several meetings with the staff there. So you are in an amazing position to just send that cold email. And if any of you want to work on the issue of college student hunger, we have an amazing training program, or just get on calls with us. You don't need to go through a training. Just reach out to us and we'll help you get set up and meet with your state and federal legislators. And I want to close this out with a kind of funny story. So, Stanley, I see that you jumped in. I wanted to say that leadership is not all about leading people. It's more being resilient and having capacity. Yes, it takes a lot of capacity. Well said. Okay. Does anyone recognize who this person is in the background of this photo? I'll zoom in for you. So this is me and my friend Usher, not my actual friend, maybe a month ago. Yeah, about a month ago. I took a big risk and I said yes to being on a reality show. I don't know if anyone else here has ever been on a reality show, but I had the chance to go on a reality show called The Activist. And it was going to be on CBS, which is a very big news station in California, in the United States. And it was going to be me and 5 other amazing activists, including this woman, Esther Chungo from Zambia, who's amazing. And it was a chance to bring our work to a national stage, international stage. They said, sure, it's a reality show and it's going to be a little watered down. But it was also the chance to get our issue in front of millions of people every week for 5 weeks. And I said, even if I have to look silly and do challenges and whatever, it's worth it. And also it's much better than watching, I love the Kardashians, but it's much better than watching the Kardashians on TV. So I said yes. And what I learned throughout the process is that we should always say yes to risks and opportunities. But unfortunately, a lot of people learned about the show and didn't understand it. And they said, this is all about, Usher was one of the judges. I have to add that. Usher was a judge on the show. Yes, Esther Chungo is one of my dearest friends. We were on the show together for many weeks. And I had we got a lot of pushback from people who said this show, they didn't know anything about the show except for one little paragraph and that who the judges were. And they decided to push back on the show. And we got so much pushback that CBS decided to shelf the show and say, we're actually not going to air this. And so it was a crazy moment where something went from being an incredible opportunity to something that doesn't exist anymore. Although we are now working on a documentary, which will be a beautiful chance to still share about our work. But it's this balance that we have to take as leaders of always say yes to taking a risk, but also following your moral compass. Do you think I'm ever going to go on a reality show again? Probably not. That was a crazy risk that I took, and I learned a lot from it. But at this point, I learned that there are other ways for me and my cause to get attention brought onto our work in a way that I can actually control the production and control the editing and control the press releases that go out. So as you're choosing to take risks, make sure that they're in line with your moral compass, or make sure that your skin is thick enough that when the shit hits the fan, when people on Twitter say, we don't want this, you're able to be like, I stand by my choice. And at this point, I stand by my choice. I thought it was an amazing risk. Who would say no to having millions of people learn about your work? And I learned from it. So I encourage everyone to take risks and also be really in tune with your moral compass. And finally, this is a quick quote that I wanted to share. Actually, you know what? I'm going to stop here because we're a little over time. I wanted to share, this is not the right email. Let's do team at Swipe Hunger. If you want to follow us on social media, my social media is basically this. I talk to the camera about issues and share inspirational stories from my journey. So you can feel free to follow Swipe Out Hunger, to follow about our work, or follow me at Rachel Sumekh. And with that, Sean, I'll pass it over to you.
Well, thank you, Rachel. It's been really exciting to learn more about Swipe Out Hunger and in your journey through this and the really amazing and inspiring work that you have been able to do. I know that a lot of times, you know, you might assume that people have access to food and assume a lot of things, you know, and until you get down to it, you don't realize that's not the case. And I think that this organization does a lot of great work. I know here at the University of South Florida, they have a food pantry set up and things like that. And I know it helps benefit a lot of people. And I guess we'll move into a question and answer period. If you can please leave any questions you have down in the chat, and then we can go from there. And I guess the first question I had, you know, is as you have built this really amazing organization, what are some of the challenges that you have faced along the way in doing this? And how has that message you talked about of sharing an inspiring story, how has that helped to contribute to Swipe Out Hunger?
I mean, there are so many challenges associated with going from making something from an idea into reality. But I'll say that all of the opportunities and learning and impact obviously were bigger and more exciting. That kept me going. So I've been doing this for 11 years now. I started when I was about 18 and now I'm 29. I actually turned 30 next month, which is exciting. But I think one of the biggest challenges was honestly around trusting myself. For so long, I thought I needed to go and talk to 4 advisors before I did anything in public, before I believed that my idea was right. And what that does is it really slows you down. And so I think there's work that I could have done that would have made me more confident in the beginning, especially as a young woman, to just go for it. Maybe talk to one person instead of having to talk to 3, not run everything through a plan. And I guess I'll say one other challenge was fundraising. You know, I'm sure many people on this phone call are trying to fundraise. I didn't have a bunch of rich uncles I could call and like corporate partners, but you just DM people. You cold email them, you ask for introductions. You have nothing to lose by sending a cold email. It's how I made a lot of our good partners. Oh, and I see this comment from Teresa. You should always get a second opinion. The problem was I was doing it. I was like sending people drafts of my emails and saying like, how does this email look? Like I took it to an extreme, right? I think getting a second and third opinion, especially when it's really an important big decision or you might have a blind spot, or we all have blind spots, are really critical, but make sure you don't take it to an extreme.
Well, thank you. I guess it looks like here we have a question from Jeremiah. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question, if you can.
Yeah, thank you for the chat. My name is Jeremiah, and I have a non-profit organization that's still growing. And we also work on agriculture as one of our activities. And I would like to know if you're open to partner with the grassroots organization. If yes, so what are the requirements, especially for this organization? We are really like coming up from very low ground, no records, no experience.
As of now, the groups that we work the most with are colleges and college students in the United States. So we don't have the capacity to work internationally yet or work with other grassroots orgs. But if anyone on the call is at a college or has a student group on campus, we'd love to hear from you. But at this point, not ready to go international. You always got to know as an organization what goes beyond your mission and to focus exactly on the problem you're solving before you go too big and too wide.
Thank you. We have time for just a few more questions. Josephine Banjo, it looks like you have a question if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Okay. I want to ask a question about leadership, because sometimes you work in like teams or like in a committee, and as a leader, you're just following by your own principles and the way you think it should work out. So sometimes you may not be fully aware that your principles or your method of doing the project doesn't please everybody else in your team. So how can you avoid? Because if like you said, everybody should be connected. So if one person in that team is not fully like cooperative with you or doesn't understand the way you're doing things, how can you solve that issue? Like, I want to know, how can someone solve that type of issue?
Josephine, have you ever confronted the person directly and kind of named that there's an issue here, that there's tension? Sometimes not. I think that one of the best things we can do is name, like I do this with my team. Sometimes someone doesn't agree with something I did, right? And I can go to them and say, like, you're derailing the whole meeting because you're upset about this decision that happened 20 minutes ago. We've moved on. And we can then have the chance. And I gave that person 2 hours. We talked about everything, what made them upset. And sometimes they understand and they move along with you. And sometimes they're more committed to being attached to their ego and being right. And if it doesn't work, if the person is continuing to slow down your work, I would say try and find another opportunity for them that's not on your team, because sometimes you can change people, but your job is not to change people. You're not a therapist. Your job is to create impact. So work with them, be honest, say like, I love you. I want to work with you. We have this important cause we're working towards. How can I support you in getting on the train with us? Do you need more clarity? Do you need a day off? Do you need support? Do everything you can to support that person in their journey. Focus on the shared goal. And if you can't help them, then maybe it's time for them to move on. But I think honesty and love initially, which are scary and vulnerable, is the most important.
Thank you. We have time, I think, for one more question. I saw Nanki, you had raised your hand. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. My name is Nanki Arora. I'm from India. And the question I had for you, Rachel, was as you expanded Swipe Out Hunger across the United States, did you face any regional pushback? As we all know, different regions, even under the same country, have different aspects that need to be accounted for. So did you face any pushback in that regard? And if yes, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, we had many of the Ivy League schools, which are these big fancy schools, who were like, we're not going to do this program because we don't have any hungry students here. We're big and fancy and rich and no hungry people here. And we didn't really waste our time with them. We kept working with schools and regions that were excited to work with us, that were acknowledging this issue. And what happened was once we got one school in, for instance, in New York next to Cornell on board, within weeks, Cornell reached out to us and said, okay, we want to get on board too. So what we did was we changed the environment around them. They were resistant. So we got the community and people around them to normalize this idea. And in general, when it comes to resistance, I think what you have to do is just focus on where you have momentum and where you can influence people. So if someone's resisting, how do you tell a story or influence them to change their mind? And oh my God, I wish we had forever to talk more about all these questions. I apologize that this timing is coming to an end. Should we do one more question?
Okay. Yeah, that would be fine. Let's see. We have a few questions. One from, I'm sorry if I don't pronounce this correctly, or just the question, it's about leadership. I one time led a community project. The reviews basically weren't good and I didn't like it also. Ever since I've been avoiding leadership roles, I'm not cool with it. What do I do?
Wow. It's amazing your self-awareness here, that you knew that you stepped in, it didn't go well, and now you've intentionally chosen to take a step back. I would say start with working on a team with someone else. You don't have to jump in and lead a project immediately. Maybe there's a project you want to get involved with, and then trust that, like, in a smaller role, rebuild that trust in yourself, that in a smaller role, you can take something on. Because at this point, you don't want to ramp back up to 100. It might build your strength more if you take one baby step, join another team, be the lead on a smaller project, and then step back into leadership. I love that you're not cool with it. You should never be cool with not being your full, true leader self. So continue to ask, how do I get back to that? And I think being in action, joining a team, even if it's for a day, step up to help someone, volunteer, do a small leadership task that can get that muscle back up and running.
Well, thank you. I guess one question regarding the Forbes 30 Under 30 honor, that's a tremendous honor. And my question is, what did the affirmation of being named on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list mean for you, knowing that the world of social impact can be lonely and thankless sometimes, that young people trying to make a difference, they sometimes have to grapple with imposter syndrome? How important do you think it is for them to be recognized, spotlighted, and appreciated?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you that when my mom, who's an immigrant, was able to tell the world what my job was, that was a more proud moment for me than getting on the Forbes list. So I think what really my affirmation came from was like my family and my community recognizing and understanding my work. Being on the Forbes list was amazing because it got a lot of media. It opened some doors for us. But really it only opened doors that I was already knocking on. So while I was like hitting the ground doing this work, finally that press opened doors we were already knocking on. It didn't suddenly change my life and lead to a lot of money. So sometimes media and accolades are only as strong as we let them be. They're tools that we use as opposed to a red carpet. Yeah. But again, I know having my grandma tell people what I do, that was really exciting.
Well, thank you. This is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you to everyone for tuning in. This is such an incredible fellowship you all are in, the leadership you've all chosen to step into. I hope that our conversation today gave you a little bit to think about, an opportunity to work on, like what we can do together. So please stay in touch, reach out. I'm here as a partner with you in this work. Thank you so much.
Yes, well, thank you so much for taking time to do this. This has been such an exciting opportunity to get to hear from you. If you wouldn't mind, I know you had shared your contact information before, but if you could put that up again, if possible, put that in the chat so people could stay in touch with you and continue to stay updated with Swipe Out Hunger. And just wondering if you had any, I know you already sort of did this, but if you had any other closing remarks or final thoughts to leave with Millennium Fellows.
One of the things I'll leave you all with is you probably already have the answers to the questions that you're asking. And when you go and ask people for advice, go ahead and just lead with what you know and get feedback directly. One of the biggest lessons I learned when I was growing up when I was starting this is you have to keep the mission at the center. Sometimes we'll say, I don't vibe with that person. I don't get along with that person. But sometimes we have to work in ways that keep the mission at the center. So as much as we can, as I talked about earlier, try and get people on board, try and move us forward. Keep the mission at the center. Don't take it personally. When people didn't want to work with us, I would get so sad and take things so personally, as if they were saying no to me. But in reality, they were just saying no to the moment and the opportunity. So the more we can keep the mission at the center and not get caught up in our own feelings, the more we'll be able to stay focused on what matters.
Well, thank you.
Especially in your early 20s.
Thank you very much. That's really very inspiring and very exciting to hear. And thank you for participating. And thank you all for your time today to participate in the fellowship. And we're going to be having the next event for the Millennium Fellowship will take place tomorrow for a webinar with Marianne Suba from Last Mile Health, and that's going to be tomorrow, October 15th, from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and you can register for that online. So again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you for taking time to participate, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.